right. Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you, Yayoi, and everybody for inviting me here today. I tailored this presentation to a group that, as I can tell from the meeting so far, is very knowledgeable about these issues. So I'm going to zip along and cover a lot, and then hopefully leave room for questions and we can drill down on specifics. Stephanie referred to a presentation which I really explained what bottle bills were and how to craft a bottle bill system specific for DC. I'm going to go broader than that and kind of take a look back at how we got to where we are today too. Okay, so the hardest part of doing a presentation is actually having it share. Did that work? All right, that's a miracle. All right. So, as Stephanie already explained, my name is Kirstie Pecci. Kirstie, like thirsty, is the easiest way to remember it. I refer to myself often as the trashy attorney because it makes me laugh every time. And I'm the executive director of Just Zero. Why did we create Just Zero? It's a nonprofit organization. We work soup to nuts on zero waste issues, which means all the way from establishing composting programs and pilots, plastics issues, other types of recycling, textiles, anti-incineration, anti-chemical recycling, anti-anything that is a false solution, anti-landfill as much as possible. Really true zero waste as defined by the Zero Waste International Alliance. We really work to support community-centered, circular, and sustainable solutions. And what that means is, again, real zero waste, what communities want to see, not what we come in as experts and try and tell them they want, but understanding their expertise in their community and reflecting that in these solutions. We do not, and this is something to understand about nonprofits, a lot of nonprofits are truly evil, like the American Chemistry Council. We do not take money from unethical sources or bad actors. So we don't accept money from Coca-Cola or incineration companies or plastic companies. So that is a difference between us and a lot of nonprofits who are working in this space and in a lot of environmental spaces. And when you're looking into advice or any information you get from a nonprofit, see who's on the board, I would say. Because unfortunately, a lot of folks are not necessarily looking out for the little guy's best interest. So again, I'm going to zip right along because I think a lot of you are living this every day and thinking about this, and that's why you have your BYO Reduces group. What we're seeing in our recycling system is that most of the recyclables are still in the trash. They're not in curbside. They're not in bottle bills or other programs. They're in the trash still. The single stream materials are low or no value materials because they've all been mixed together. We're seeing that the value has been reduced because they're all mixed together. And many counties and cities and communities are trapped in very expensive single stream material recycling facility or MRF monopolies, meaning that the curbside system is run by a waste company. Many times it's a landfill or incineration company that also does curbside recycling. As an aside, they pick this stuff up, they put them on these conveyor belts like what you see here, and they sort out and cherry pick out some more valuable items, recycle or downcycle a lot of it, and then whatever's left ends up going into the landfill or being ground up for landfill cover. Some of this, for instance, the glass in these systems is being used for roadbed or landfill cover. So that's what we're dealing with. And in the Northeast, where I'm from, and I live in Massachusetts, we pay some of the highest tipping fees, meaning per ton cost for recycling and trash in the country. Those tipping fees are based on tonnage. So the companies have set it up so you only can use curbside single stream systems, so that they have a total monopoly. Boston just had a recycling RFP put out. The only bidder was Casella's MRF in Boston. That was the only bidder. They have a total monopoly on the recycling that comes out of the community in Boston for the residentials. So that's what we're seeing, and it's not working, it's expensive, and it's very, very polluting and very, very wasteful. So how did we get to this place? In the 80s and 90s, when recycling was starting, We saw a patchwork of local systems. There were companies like Earthworm who took office paper. They literally had a truck and they drove around Boston and they went from office building to office building, many of which are almost empty now. But in those days, they were chock full of attorneys and accountants and business people who were creating tons of white, high-grade office paper. They would sort it out, Earthworm would pick it up, and that would get recycled again into white, high-grade office paper. The local residential systems were mostly dual stream, meaning that paper and cardboard was kept separate from containers. And the trash was in trash cans. The recycling was in carts. The paper, there was a lot of newspaper in the system then, which we don't see now in most states. But there's a lot of newspaper in the system. The newspaper and other personal papers and cardboard from home were bundled up together, tied together, and picked up separately, which preserved their value. We also had much less plastic in the system. Many of the foods and other goods that we purchase now that are in plastic were not in plastic then. There were no plastic grocery bags when I was a kid. That was where it was at. So that's where we came from. That's what the system was. It was not a perfect system. Most of the recyclables were still being thrown away. There was still a significant amount of contamination in the containers. It was, pretty expensive. We also had many local landfills. We had about 95 in the country. We had about 9,500 operating landfills. Now we're down to about 2,500. So landfills are much more regulated now. So it became big business. You had to be able to hire engineers and attorneys to build mega landfills. And that's what we're dealing with now. So what happened then? As I said, we moved with more regulation, we moved to mega landfills. And we went to single stream recycling. Single stream, your paper, your cardboard, your plastic, your aluminum, your glass was all supposed to be in one container. It was supposed to be easier. It was largely in carts. Carts meaning the kind that have a cover on the top of them that the machine picks up and they automatically are dumped into the single stream recycling truck. The reason that we see this switch is twofold. One of them is very simply because there were a lot of injuries to workers that were very expensive to the landfill and recycling companies in the past because they were picking up trash cans, picking up carts full and receptacles full of glass. So they were injured. This cart system where the truck automates it avoids those injuries. And to be perfectly frank, it's not that the companies were so worried about avoiding the injuries, they were worried about avoiding paying for the injuries. Not that I want anyone to be injured, but that's the reality. What companies said, and we have news releases from 2010 and somewhat before from different companies, but for instance, Casella told the city of Cambridge, that you can put anything in these carts. You can put Christmas tree lights and we're going to recycle them. You can put laundry baskets in them and you're going to recycle them. Anything that you think is plastic, aluminum, cardboard, paper, or glass, you can throw in here and we're going to recycle it. Now that was all, excuse my French, bullshit. Okay, it always was bullshit. That has none of those things have ever been truly recyclable, meaning these items like laundry baskets and Christmas tree lights. There was never a market or a manner in which we could separate the plastic out so it would be pure enough to recycle. What they did was send all of these materials in empty containers back to China. They sent all these single stream materials to China, especially the contaminated mixed paper and the plastic. A couple things have happened in the interim. One, that destroyed our local paper recycling mill business. We had local paper recycling. When you're getting office paper from Earthworm downtown in Boston, you can recycle that locally. As soon as you make single stream recycling the norm, the paper is filled with glass and bits of plastic, and it destroyed the machines, and we no longer have widespread paper recycling mills in the New England area, for instance, and other places. Some of them are coming back in different ways, but it's not going to be what it was because, again, we're not keeping the material separate. You can't unscramble the egg. Another thing that happened is those materials were not getting recycled because they were too contaminated in China in great percentages. China was separating a lot of, again, cherry picking the best stuff and building up their own recycling system and the infrastructure they needed to recycle. And then in 2018, well, as we'll see, in 2018, we saw that the China's national sword policy went in place. They no longer want our contaminated plastic and our contaminated paper. We can send plastic and paper to China. That is something that they will accept, but it has to be sorted really, really well. And we cannot sort these materials well with a single stream system. It is impossible to do in a cost-effective manner. So what we have is higher costs, about the same tonnage is diverted. The idea, and I was at meetings in the 2000s with the Mass Department of Environmental Protection. They were talking about going to single stream. They said, we're going to divert so much more tonnage, it's going to be worth it for a slightly lower level of quality. Well, no, we have about the same tonnages. There's actually much less recycling happening. As I said already, material recycling facilities run by large landfill companies are monopolizing a lot of the system. We've got more waste than ever. And because of China's national sword program, the waste companies said, we are going to charge cities, towns, counties, and other systems for the fact that we can no longer ship this stuff out for free. You, city of blank, whatever it is, Boston, Philadelphia, whomever it is, you are going to pay for this. So the city of Boston and many cities and towns all over Massachusetts, but also all over the country, have seen huge increased costs in their recycling, their per ton fee, so that it is sometimes more expensive to recycle than it is to dispose of the trash. So this is an epic fail. Okay, we took a system that wasn't great, but at least worked, and now we made it more expensive, more polluting, and there's even less recycling going on. And I want to just reiterate that the only plastics, the MRF system as a whole has been interrogated by Greenpeace and by Last Beach Cleanup and other folks, and they've looked at what is actually recycled through the single stream systems, because some material recycling facilities, these MRFs, will accept certain things, so folks think that they're recycling them. That is not true. Many times they have a contract where they're beholden and required to accept cartons or polystyrene. They're just throwing that in the trash. There's almost no recycling of those materials, for instance, in the United States. What they are recycling is metal. They are recycling, as we said, paper and cardboard, though it is downcycling mostly. Downcycling meaning it's not as high and good a use as if it were recycled back into what it is already. In other words, box to box. It's not box to box. It's box to filler, for instance. We are seeing that number 1, number 2, and some number 5 plastic. So think Coke bottles, milk bottles, and number 5 would be like yogurt tubs, as probably you all are very familiar with. Those materials are being downcycled. They're not being made into food grade material ever. No single stream materials are being made into food grade when it comes to plastic. Not happening. And then finally, as I already said, the glass is being downcycled as well. If you can call it downcycled, I call it thrown away if it's being made into road bed and landfill cover. So we've got a very expensive system that's not working now. So we do have solutions though, and many of them are solutions that are already working in different parts of the country that we can adopt and make happen in real time. First off, as you all know, refill, reduce, that's everything. And that's why it's fantastic. Everything, meaning that is absolutely the pinnacle of what we want to be doing, right? Not using something or reusing something to the best of our ability. So programs like the ones that you are all spearheading are really, really important. And I applaud that work. We can get into a conversation about the different types of refill that are out there, many of which I know you're all familiar with, and also how these different sectors work, which I think is really important. So to zip through the slide in a more structured way, one of the best ways to reduce is what's called pay as you throw, PAYT, or save money and reduce trash. What that means very simply is that you incentivize folks or businesses to have less trash. You have to make the disposal system, the cost of the disposal system increase if they're creating more trash. many times that is buried in the system. Certainly in when it comes to dumpsters, for instance, they're picked up once a week, no matter how much is in them. There's no incentive for businesses to reduce how much trash they're putting in. And there are ways with sensors to make that, to change the system so you're picking it up only when it's full. So that's on the commercial side. On the residential side, pay as you throw, charging for bags, charging for different cart sizes, and continuing to change that really, really works. And when I say it works, I mean it reduces trash by 40–50%. In New Hampshire, the UNH, University of New Hampshire, did a study, and they compared towns that have good pay-as-you-throw systems compared to those that don't, and it is astronomical, the amount of trash that's saved. There is some increase in recycling, but it's really worth it. The other thing I think it's really important to think about when you're looking at this work is secondary packaging. We think about the packaging we have in our homes. Most packaging, like about 60% of it, is secondary packaging, meaning it's a box that the shirts come in to get to the store, right? Or that the cereal boxes come in to get to the store. So that secondary packaging is a huge part of the problem. We're not capturing that with our residential systems anyway. We're not capturing even our business systems, with our even the tertiary or primary packaging is not being captured in businesses. So that, I think about the ICI sector, the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector. So when we're looking at this waste problem, we have to remember, yes, we care about secondary packaging. We also care about schools, hospitals, businesses, the town hall, and industrial uses. And their recycling needs are different, but many times it's a lot of the same problems. So it's important to keep that in mind when we're looking at these solutions and adapting all these solutions to residential as well as these systems. And then but there's also the personal versus community refill piece of this is really important to consider. You folks are already up against that. As Tara said a few minutes ago, there are community systems and ways to do this in stores and require the refill to be allowed, but also to incentivize the refill. And so that's doing that community-wide, but then also the piece that you guys are expert in, the personal, responsibility, and having that be part of your personal life, as you already said, having your refillable bottle be, as important to you as a religious emblem, or like your rosary beads for 2024. Yeah, I think that works, totally works for me. Again, we need sector-wide reuse systems. We can't just be cutting off pieces of it, but we can start cutting off pieces of it. And then finally, when you're looking at reduction and refill, I think it's very, very important that we remember we need to mandate a piece of this, but then also we need to have funding, right? A lot of our refill options, when we're talking about, and I'll get into this more when we talk about the bottle bill, we're talking about a system of refill. We also need a system of collection, separation, if necessary, and then washing, and then bringing it back. So a lot of our refill piece is going to be expensive to start off, and then it's going to save businesses and individuals money later on. But we need that initial funding, maybe from climate work. We're looking at a lot of the climate funding that's going to be coming down, and washing machines for bottles and other systems would be a great way to move that forward. So that's when I look at the reuse and refill piece, there's a huge landscape there, and whatever piece your group decides to do, keep in mind these pieces, but be cognizant you can't do it all. As I think Stephanie said at the beginning of this, you have to decide what your universe is. It's not just your geographical universe, it's also your sector universe, and also whether you're focusing on the personal or the community, these different ways of slicing this problem, slicing and dicing this problem. So the actual recycling is after that, right? And when I say it's after that, remember that reuse and refill is superior because you're avoiding all of the embodied energy, all of the water to produce something, all the harvesting of the materials in the first place to make the cup, right? And then if you use the cup over and over, you avoid all those single use costs. The climate impact of any type of refill or reuse system literally looks like a straight line right up into the sky. It's like a rocket, right? Recycling is also superior to single use, but It's not as steep a curve. So recycling comes second for that reason. And again, real recycling means remaking or manufacturing into the same product or a product of equal value. Replacing the use of virgin materials as much as possible, not downcycling, certainly not burning or using it as landfill cover. Many recycling regulations across this country allow landfill cover to count as recycled. And I'll tell you right now, the waste companies take, they get paid so much money to take contaminated soil to use for landfill cover. They grind up construction demolition materials and get paid for that to use it for landfill cover. There is no shortage of landfill cover. Incinerator ash, there's an ash landfill on the Cape Cod in Massachusetts that has listed the tonnage. There are 450,000 tons a year, but they take of incinerator ash from a local incinerator, and then they have 40,000 tons of ash a year, but they use as cover from the same damn incinerator. So they're not any loss for cover. We don't need to provide cover with precious materials like glass, like contaminated ground up glass. We need to be separating these things out. Very important too, when we're looking at recycling and evaluating a recycling program, to think about pre and post consumer. Like for instance, TerraCycle. I don't know if you folks are familiar with that. You send your nonsense into TerraCycle in a box, right? All these materials that there's no market for, there's no place for recycling them, there's no way that they can be sorted enough to be recycled. And TerraCycle always explains how much they're recycling each year. The stuff TerraCycle is recycling, according to various articles and in reviews that I've read, is from the cutting room floor. It's the industrial pre-consumer material. That stuff is clean as a whistle. If I make something out of one kind of plastic, say bottles, and I have pieces of bottles or whatever it is, fill in the blank, a piece of clothing, whatever it is. If I have one type of material, clean as a whistle on the bottom, on the floor of a factory, and I sweep it up and TerraCycle recycles that, that's like falling off a chair. That's as easy as could be, right? That's not impressive. That's the recycling that TerraCycle does. The stuff that they take in from boxes, that's every piece of nonsense plastic you've ever seen in your home, kids' toys and everything else, that's not getting recycled. So when someone tells you they're recycling something, ask them, what are you recycling? Are you recycling something that actually went out into the world and was used and then had to come back? Or are you recycling something that you literally swept up from a cutting room floor? That's true for composting or any of these pieces. Interrogate where this is coming from. And then again, as I already said, you want to look at different sectors. Different sectors are more problematic for different reasons. None of it's easy, but remember that until we get to the entirety of the system, it can't just be residential, it can't just be industrial, it has to be the entirety of the system. We're not going to solve this problem. So one of my favorite solutions is a bottle bill. Okay, so with all of those principles in mind that I just talked through, so as to what makes up a real solution, I always joke, if a bottle bill were a person, I would marry the bottle bill. I love the bottle bill, okay? Because the bottle bill, actually now that I'm thinking about it, like my husband when I met him when we were both in school, it has so much potential and it works so hard. And it's just a beautiful, elegant way to solve a problem. And we don't pay for the bottle bill. The bottle bill is paid for by industry. So for all those reasons, I love the bottle bill. There are other reasons that I love my husband too, but for those reasons, I love the bottle bill. Now there's bottle bills and there's bottle bills, right? For everything we do, again, we want to interrogate what we're dealing with and what the reality is here that we're handling. The bottle bills are superior to other extended producer responsibility systems, meaning systems where the producer is paying for the movement of the material and the collection of the material so that it can be recycled again. Those extended producer responsibility systems, we've seen them for lots of different stuff: mattresses, electronics, paints, carpets, all kinds of materials, and then packaging in Europe and Canada. We've passed, I think, 4 EPR for packaging systems here in the United States. All of them work in different ways, and some of them work better than others. What they're missing that the bottle bill has is the deposit as an incentive to bring a bottle back, right? I don't have to bring my cardboard box back. I'm not going to get 10 cents back for it, but I want to bring my bottle back. That deposit is crucial. That money, as I've explained many times, is just between it's just the consumer's money. You pay an extra 10 cents when you buy the beverage, or say 10 cents, 5 cents in Massachusetts still, unfortunately, or more in other states and other countries, excuse me. You pay that amount of money, 10 cents, say, and then you get it back. Like Oregon, 10 cents, you get it back, right? If you don't get the 10 cents back, in many places, and what I recommend is that the 10 cents then goes to fund a program. Like in other states, Massachusetts, for instance, it goes into the coffers of the state. It used to be used only for environmental programs, which we're trying to make happen again. Now it can be used for anything in the state. It's great to tie it, for instance, to refill stations. There's lots of great things you can do. That's what you want to do. You don't want that deposit to go to pay for the system. That's what Oregon does. I'm sorry, Tara, but it makes me very upset. And so what that means is if they get to 90–95% return, which is what we want, there's no money to run the system. So then the taxpayers have to pay for it. We don't want that the way Oregon's done that. We want it to be handled the way most places have done it, which is to make sure that the deposit goes into something good. And if there are no deposits because everyone brings their bottles and cans back, great, even better. Again, as I already said, the producer pays. The mechanism by which they pay can differ. It can be a handling fee, which means 2 or 3 cents on each bottle. It can be a registration fee. There's other ways of doing it. The most important thing is that the producer has to pay for the movement of that bottle so it goes and gets refilled or recycled. It has to be enough money so there'll be enough facilities to bring your bottles back to, because if you don't have convenience, as you'll see there, if you don't have return to retail and ways to bring it back easily, if someone with a car is the only person who can bring their bottle or can back, then it becomes quite honestly a classist or even racist bill. So we need to make sure that the producer pays an adequate handling and registration fee. We want to make sure all the beverage containers that can be recycled are included: glass, aluminum, and plastic. We don't want to include cartons or pouches. They're not going to get recycled. We want to make sure that we have clear targets. And if the targets are not met, then the handling fee or the deposit increases. In other words, if people aren't bringing their bottles and cans back because 5 cents isn't worth what it used to be, like in Massachusetts, then it automatically should increase. If people aren't bringing their bottles and cans back because there's no place to do it in their community, then that should be evaluated and the handling fee should increase. So there are more places to do it to cover that cost. As I said, so those targets should act as triggers for those increases of the deposit and the handling fee. And then finally, as with any recycling scheme, and I think you could hear me, lawyering out as we were talking about the first pieces of this and how you evaluate systems, reporting, transparency, and enforceability are crucial. If it is not transparent, if there is no reporting, if there is no enforcement, it is going to fail. It is going to be taken over by the industry and subsumed into some other nefarious scheme for them to make a shit ton of money off of all of us. You need to make sure that we have reporting, transparency, and that the agencies or other folks involved can enforce the terms of the legislation. This is something that's true for extended producer responsibility for packaging, for any recycling system on Earth. Honestly, for any scheme on Earth that the government puts in place, you need all of those pieces. So that that way, if things are going sideways, we can get the documents, take a look at them, and call it out and make sure that the agency can enforce. Bottle bills save money on disposal and recycling. It's about 20% of your curbside recycling. So if you have no bottle bill at all, and then you put a bottle bill in that includes everything from nips to big bottles of alcohol and everything in between, plastic, aluminum, glass, any of the beverages in there, you are going to reduce your recycling by 20%, straight up across the board. Another piece of this, usually when we talk about which beverages are included, a lot of times people leave dairy out of these systems. It depends. It turns out everyone in Canada gets their milk in a bag. Did everybody else know this? They get their milk in a bag and they put it in their fridge in like an upright container. And they put the milk in it's in a plastic bag with a spout. I think that's very gross, but supposedly that's what they do in Canada. I guess our plastic lined cartons are no better. So, but so that's one reason why a lot of places don't have a milk as part of their bottle bill. But a lot of the other reason is sometimes the dairy lobby is very strong. But then another piece of it is that honestly, it's a putrescent, you know, it just stinks up the system. Bottle bills always create local jobs. They're good, clean, safe local jobs, much safer than working at a material recycling facility where the sorting can get really, really dangerous. The positive climate impact we already talked about. It's much better if you're reusing or refilling than if you're recycling, but it's still good. It reduces the use of virgin resources. Also, one of my favorite things about the bottle bill is it opens up the road to refill. Oregon has an excellent pilot program working with breweries, for instance. There are wine programs. There's a Ravino program that's trying to take off. If you have, and that's happening in California and other places, if you have a way to collect the bottles and cans and bring them back somewhere centrally, you've solved half of the refill problem right there. And when I talk about refill, I'm talking about glass refill. I am not down with plastic refill. It is too dangerous. And also we need to stop using plastic for single-use materials and unnecessary uses entirely, for lots of reasons, as you already know. But that's the thing, a bottle bill in the United States will enable us to actually have a refill system. So that is the bottle bill. The phase out of non-essential plastics is another piece that is absolutely necessary. And I am working right now on the rewrite of the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which includes a bottle bill, an EPR for Packaging Act, but then also a phase out of, you know, the plastics that have been phased out or banned in other places. Stephanie mentioned dry cleaner bags. That's a great one. Grocery bags, black plastic, polystyrene, all the little straws and stirrers and baloney. Also the hotel toiletries. Illinois passed a hotel toiletries ban. Illinois passed it, guys. Like, we got to get this done, right? Balloon releases, don't even get me started. There's a whole list of crap that we shouldn't be using at all, that we should start by banning, and then that list is just going to grow and grow. The United States recently came out with a list of what they consider unnecessary. One of the agencies said a list of unnecessary plastics. I think that's a good starting point, and we just need to keep bearing down on this. And one of the ways to do that is a bottle bill and refill system. The reason I say that is once a bottle bill is in place, the producers, it's actually cheaper for them to put once a refill system is in place, it's cheaper for them bottle to bottle to be refilling than it is to be paying for the recycling of these bottles. So it becomes more efficient once you put these systems in place and actually force the producers to have skin in the game. If they're responsible for the end of, I don't like to say end of life, but end of the use of the product packaging, then they will be on the hook. They will have skin in the game, and it's easier for us to move to the refill systems that we all love. I think that you guys already know this, but I will mention it again. And if people have questions about it, plastics polluting at every stage. It's never going to be recycled in high numbers. We can talk about that all night if you want to. And it is the petrochemical industry's plan B. So for all those reasons, it needs to go. It is so dangerous. The production of plastic is so dangerous and polluting. And when you talk to people who live near these facilities, it literally makes you want to cry and makes you ashamed for the way we're handling things now. I think that you all know this very, very well, but local governments are a huge part in changing how this problem is perceived and also making real change on the ground. Strong zero waste plans are part of those solutions. Yes, I love the bottle bill, as you've already heard ad nauseum. Yes, I want some plastic bans anywhere we can throw them. But if you can get a good zero waste plan in place, then the community starts to interrogate what they're paying for. This is more of a residential solution, but it works for institutions and businesses too. What are we paying for? What are we throwing away and what are we paying for? I love the story of Boston College when the food waste ban was going to place in Massachusetts. They stopped buying certain vegetables because the kids weren't eating them and they were just throwing them out every time. So you need a zero waste plan to look at, what am I throwing away? Do I need to buy it in the first place? What are we using this stuff for? We've already talked about pay-as-you-throw, which I'm happy to talk about in more length. It is difficult to pass pay-as-you-throw programs. I am now recommending that agencies put them in as part of their, if you want funding from the state or Commonwealth that you're in, you need to show us your strong zero waste plan and how it's going to bring pay as you throw into the community, because I think it's too hard legislatively, but we can talk, I'm sure some of you have experience with that too. Again, I can't say this enough, reporting, transparency, enforcement. If you don't have an enforcement measure, if you don't have transparency, and if you don't have required reporting by the company or whomever is on the hook for paying, then they are going to lie to you, lie of omission. Okay, we've seen that in every system that's gone into place around the country. If you don't have reporting from the corporation, you end up with just, you know, a morass of not knowing what the heck's going on, and people lie. Clean compost. Compost is 25-33% of the waste system. Getting that food separated and out is a great way to clean up your recycling too. And also make it so your trash costs are much lower, because you can have your compost picked up every week, but your trash picked up every other week or once a month maybe. And then again, great work by all of you, because we have to continue to lead on refill policy locally, which I know you all understand deeply and personally, which is fantastic. Again, the system we have now, single stream, is tragically flawed, and we cannot fix plastic recycling with technology or education. Those solutions are not going to work to the degree that we need them to. They might help a little bit, might bend around the edges, but if we really need to overhaul the whole system if we want this to work. And so what we need is producer pays, local systems, true circularity, making sure we're taking care of the residential and the institutional, commercial, and industrial sectors, transparency, clearing roads to refill and reuse. If you're passing something and it's not helping you get to refill or reuse, then you're not thinking about the long-term solutions, and we need actual recycling. So I know that was a lot, but I know a lot of it you're very familiar with already. So I hope I didn't move along too quickly. This is where you can find Just Zero. And if you look here, we've got our QR code, that will bring you right to our website. And finally, the last thing I'll say, I will send Yayoi we're doing a waste summit in November. I will send the information to her so that she can share it with all of you. But please sign up for our newsletter. Please consider being a donor, because again, we don't take money from the bad guys. So unfortunately, we have to squeeze all you good guys a little harder than we'd love to. And thank you so much for having me tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kirstie. Okay, well, if everyone unmuted, it would be very loud. That was fantastic. So I have 1,000 questions. However, I'm going to be a good moderator and see what the other questions are. I don't think that any came through on the chat, but I may have missed them. So and this group is fairly used to just raising their hand to ask a question. So let me see if there are any hands raised. Oh, someone did ask a question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Yayoi, while I pull up this question.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kirstie. This was a fantastic presentation. I loved it. I'm feeling so enthusiastic about it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was so great. I have a bunch of questions, but I will just focus on two. I recently heard a controversy in my local area where there's this woman who's like fighting landfills, the largest landfill in New York State, Seneca Meadows, to
you know it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And she was having a little quarrel with anti-incinerator fighters. And it's kind of silly, but it seems as though like people who are fighting incinerators, that is much of a bigger pollution issues than landfills, because landfill is the least, it's not the ideal, but it's like lesser, less terrible than air pollution or something like that. And then I wonder what's your take on that? Like, I know this might not be like a really great question, but
No, that's an excellent question. That's an excellent question. And there's actually there's an expert named Mike who always wants to pit the two solutions, the two fault solutions, landfill and incineration, as if it's an either or. It's not an either or. It's kind of like I knew one of my teachers when I was in school was having trouble with his cholesterol because of what he was eating, so he started smoking, right? Like I always think of that when they talk about landfills versus incinerators. It's a false choice, false dichotomy. So, and the way I answer that, and what to keep in mind, what if someone says this to you, is two different ways. One, what are we throwing in our trash, right? 25, maybe 33%, depending on how you measure it, is food scraps, okay? Neither of those should go in a landfill or incinerator. It's much less expensive to compost them, and we need that soil. So that's one thing. The next 25% is paper and cardboard, right? I've already taken care of half of your landfill or incinerator problem, and I haven't even gotten to any of the tough stuff, right? That's easy peasy, okay? Then probably 3 or 4, maybe 5% is glass, and 3 or 4, 5% in there is metal. Okay, again, infinitely recyclable. Like paper, you have to start adding new fibers. You can recycle glass and paper and aluminum forever. Okay, so that's again a lot. Textiles, I would argue that the textiles that don't have, first of all, almost all textiles are reusable. We've done a terrible job in this country, not only with fast fashion, but also there's a ton of recyclable, there's a ton of textiles that are ending up in the trash that have never even been used, never mind been used to the end of their life. Then a lot of those textiles are made of plastic, and there's limited recyclability there again, but we don't have to be making our textiles out of plastic. So again, replacing our textiles with organic, non-plastic materials would solve that problem, and creating systems of reuse and recycling for those textiles. That's 8% of our waste. That's a lot. Then remember, we've got about 15, 16% is plastic. Most of that, if we had systems of refill, again, gone. We don't need to be using. Most of that is, about 60% of it is single-use packaging of some kind or unnecessary plastic use of some kind. And then after that, we're talking about construction and demolition materials. Construction and demolition materials, half of them are ABC, asphalt, bricks, and concrete. That is 100% recyclable. We should never be throwing asphalt, bricks, and concrete into a landfill or an incinerator. And then a lot of the other materials in construction and demolition are also highly reusable, and recyclable. So when you take out, and some of these solutions are bigger solutions, like overhauling our textile industry. I'm not acting like any of this is small, but we've got easy solutions for about 60% of it that will save us money immediately and create local jobs. And then the next 20% of it are harder solutions, replacing our plastic in our textiles and our packaging, but very doable in what we have to do anyway, and also doing a better job deconstructing our homes and roads and businesses so that then we're actually recycling and reusing our construction demolition materials. So quite honestly, we should be able to drive down what we need to dispose of, immediately cut it in half, and then get to 75% or 80% reduction in diversion, literally within about 7 or 8 years, if we really hung tough. So that's the first part of my answer. So you opened up a Pandora's box. I'm sorry. That's the first part of my answer. Like, we don't need landfills or incinerators. Practically, we can cut down that use so much. The other part of my answer is that this is the absolute worst and most racist way to handle our materials that we could be doing. It's so wasteful. It's so expensive, and these big landfills and incinerators always end up in communities of color and impoverished communities. So we should never be considering landfills and incinerators as the answer. And finally, incinerators also create landfills. 1 in 4, if you have 4 tons of trash and you burn it in an incinerator, you end up with a ton of ash. So
Mm.
incinerators are both. You're not, so you really can't, like there's no good guy when you're talking incinerators or landfills. They're both horrible.
Thank you.
Lori has a question that I just found in the chat. Thank you for that. I'm taking notes because I think a lot of us get these questions a lot, so it's super helpful.
No, and I'm happy to, some of this is on our website, of course, and I can happy to point you to other resources too, folks, on this stuff.
Thank you. So Lori asked the question, what is your take on composite building materials from plastic film? They're selling it big time as a green way to go. Trex is the company we know about.
Yeah. So, when it comes, so a couple different problems. First of all, we need to stop using plastic, right? And so what I'm concerned about generally, and I even struggle with this when it comes to the bottle bill and other programs that actually work to recycle materials. What I'm concerned about generally is you don't want to create a market for a material so that then we keep using plastic. So a lot of our plastic from our packaging is being downcycled into clothing. That means that we have plastic clothing. The plastic bits are going to escape into the environment through our dryers and our washing machines, right? So like that's not good. So anytime that we cannot be using plastic, we should not be using plastic. A lot of the film is entirely unnecessary. So just because you have a place to send it, I'm not happy because we shouldn't be using the film in the first place. It is very polluting to recycle plastic. And then any plastic you use, like the clothes, like the park bench, like the siding on a house, it is going to shed plastic fibers. There's just no two ways about it. It is going to, I just had this conversation when I was having a gutter put on my house. If you use this material, someone had to make it. That facility, those people are being poisoned. Someone had to pump the oil. Somebody had to process the material, add chemicals to it, and use it. Someone had to cut the gutter, and then that dust is in their face, right? So, and it's going to offshed the chemicals and the plastic microplastics that Yair was talking about. So there's that. The other piece of this is we find when we track the bags that they're not getting recycled into tracks. I mean, some of them are getting captured, but a lot of the bags are just getting trashed. So I guess that there's layers to the answer. The system that they're claiming works doesn't really work. Recycling plastic is always nasty. Using and producing plastic is always nasty. Can we just avoid the nasty in the first place?
Yeah. Oh, you're getting some thumbs up there. Okay, thank you. And thank you, Lori, for the question. Is there someone who's holding their hand up and I'm not seeing? If so, if you can unmute yourself. If not, I have a question. Okay, I'm going to ask the question meanwhile. I want to make sure I understood what you were saying correctly about TerraCycle. So are you saying that certain things that TerraCycle receives on their, as you put it, the cutting floor, are workable, that are good solutions for recycling, and other things that we send them through the boxes are not? Or is TerraCycle just not a good idea in your view? So
back to the plastic recycling, like what we just said about plastic film being recycled into Trek material. My first choice would be, my first question to ask is, do we need to use this in plastic? Does this seem to be made in plastic? Now, I'm the first to admit that my contact lenses will always be made of plastic, and I can't wear glasses. That's reality. I have to deal with that. Okay, there's going to be certain things that we'll use for plastic. But we are not even close to getting to where we should be on our plastic use. It has been shoved down our throats, quite literally, by industry, so that you don't have choices to do anything else. And I always tell folks, and I think you folks are all people who have taken action, so you've probably already internalized this stress, this tension. I try, or as I said, I try to avoid plastic packaging so that I'm not absorbing chemicals or microplastics. However, I try not to beat myself up too much because I don't have good choices, right? And I tell people all the time, don't go bananas, don't drive 3 hours to recycle something, you know, when you could be doing something that would make you healthier. You know what I mean? Like there's just, you got to balance it out. Better to take action and change the laws. We need the system to change. We need to not be using as much plastic. So that's the first thing, is that plastic recycling, while it is still something that, you know, again, I am supporting it through, for instance, a bottle bill situation, that is only because I know the bottle bill will help us get beyond it. And plastic recycling as a whole, I am not for, right? Because we shouldn't be using most of these plastics, period. That's the backdrop. TerraCycle's business model is, you pay a subscription for this box and I'm going to send you stuff and I'm going to tell you I'm recycling it, and there's no place on earth for me to recycle it. Okay, so that's a lie, and I have a problem with that. And that's what their business model is for their subscribers. The materials that they report as recycled are actually materials they're getting from industrial facilities. And those are one type of plastic, so they're recyclable. Now, again, I would bet dollars to donuts, Stephanie, that whatever that facility is making, we probably don't need it to be made out of plastic, whether it's clothing or, you know, or a bottle. It probably doesn't need to be plastic, right? Maybe sometimes it does, but most of the time it is unnecessary plastic, single use and or unnecessary plastic. So that is always what we should be asking first. But meanwhile, TerraCycle is full of nonsense. And that's my point about TerraCycle. If you have a subscription box, that stuff's not getting recycled. There's no place to send it. It is getting thrown away. It is getting burned or buried. They're to the recycling they're reporting, and they've admitted this. There was a lawsuit about it. They admitted that what they're actually recycling that they're reporting is from industrial sources, pre-consumer, which is why when you talk to companies about what they're actually doing, is it post or pre-consumer is a crucial question when it comes to the efficacy of recycling systems.
Okay, that's great.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Yayoi got it. I want to take her with me everywhere.
Yes.
She knows more than I do.
Patty-
I don't know why you guys are having me speak when you guys already know this stuff.
No, well, I am
Stephanie wrote a
learning a
book,
lot.
for goodness sake. Come on.
Well, so Patty has a question. I'm gonna let her unmute and ask the question. Go ahead, Patty.
This is like a very detailed question, but in Palo Alto, I mean, they pride themselves on being zero waste. I mean, we have zero waste packets, party packs, but they're made out of plastic. We give for people to give parties and stuff so they can have plastic, you know, they don't have to use disposables for parties. But the question I have is, now they're saying that if we put our little plastic that comes off, you know, like, I don't know how to describe it, but you know, when you rip something off, like your cottage cheese, that plastic, if we put it all together in a bag, it'll be recycled. And I just kind of question, I don't even know how to find out if that's really true. You know, all that little film plastic.
So again, what I will say about recycling systems is, if you have a system where you're throwing it in single stream, then you really should doubt everything. But it sounds like Palo Alto, like Sturbridge, where I live, Sturbridge, Mass, we have a transfer station recycling system, I think of it as, or a deep sort recycling system. So we've got different trucks, you know, the what's it called, dumpsters, where we take one kind of plastic or another and separate them that way ourselves. And I used to work there when I was a kid, and we literally stood over people and made sure that the green glass is in with the green glass and the newspaper's in with the newspaper stuff. It is possible, Patty, that if you have a system like that, that they've got somebody who wants to recycle it, if they're certain it's that pure, because that's the problem. There can't be food on it. It can't be different kinds of plastic. However, filmy plastic is low grade shit. Okay. I mean, it is the absolute, you know, So I find it hard to believe that recycling means making it into that film again. What you can do is say, and this is public information, it's a city-run system, right?
Well, it's not a city run. They contract out with, you know, big
Yeah, but it's still, but the
It's a
city.
city run, but it's all, but we dump everything in, the paper, the cans, the glass.
Oh, it's all together with
It's
that.
all together. But the film, they're saying if we put it in a plastic bag, or, that's what they're saying.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we put the film in there, and that won't clog up the machines, and they use.
I would send a letter and say, I want to know where this is going. California has fantastic sunshine rules, like Freedom of Information Act rules. I would say, hey, if you're curious, like
Yeah.
I default to when I take my stuff to the recycling center here in town, I default to doing what they say because they have a place to sell whatever is in that dumpster, right? But for a long time, they had filmy plastic separated out. And I asked them, where is this filmy plastic going? And it turned out it was going to an incinerator.
Mm.
So, and remember, I know California gets partial credit for burning, and I think they were phasing that out. But burning counted for like a quarter of the recycling credit or something like that. So there was some funny math going on there that I think California recently phased out. But point being, there's a lot of ways to recycle something. And a lot of times they mean burning when they say recycle. I would ask. And also, if you're trying to bet your life on it, no, I would not bet my life on it. That's for sure. But I also say to folks, you can't build the system unless people cooperate. So if they have a place to send it and they're recycling it, and you feel like that's better, what they're making it into is better than just throwing it away. Yeah, but we shouldn't be using those containers anyway. We just use a glass jar.
Oh, okay. I think that I'm sighing because there's another question. It is 8:33. I'm going to ask the question and see if there's a short answer from you, Kirstie, and then then I'll close the meeting because
Not really my specialty, Stephanie. Short answers are nice.
Well, no, but everything you're saying is really I'm hanging on your every word, and I assume I'm in good company. And then we'll close the meeting. I'm sure some people want to watch the debate, and I just want to be respectful of people's time and also of our guest time. So the last question is from Tara. Sorry, I think I mispronounced your name before. I'm curious if Kirstie thinks we'll ever go back to multi-stream recycling. Pulling out paper into its own stream seems like it would solve a lot of problems. I think that too all the time. Yeah.
So Tara, I left this out of the presentation because I hadn't figured it out in enough detail yet. What I think makes sense, and again, like it sounds like Patty's system, if you're dropping stuff off in other places are part of this, but I think we can get there on a larger scale too. What I think makes sense, given the price points that we're dealing with now for a single stream, is what I've been researching, and it's called curbside sort, KERB side sort. And it's done in Great Britain and Ireland, hence the different spelling of the word curb. And what they are doing in some places is they have a truck that looks like an ice cream truck to me with different doors on it. And the guy gets out of the truck and puts the glass in one door, the plastic in another door, the cardboard paper in another door, the food scraps in another door, metal in the last door. And they compact it. They have a compactor that handles it. And the thing about it is that if I had that truck, which isn't cheap, right? But none of these trucks are cheap. I could literally have a covered over parking lot and have the company pick up the metal, have the different company pick up the glass, have the different company, or the bottles that were if I kept them uncrushed so we could refill them, have the company pick up the paper and cardboard, etc. And I wouldn't need to build a massive material recycling facility with the conveyor belts. So it's cheaper. It could be done locally. Again, local jobs that I find local solutions are much more compelling with this stuff. And it could actually mean that most of these materials are recycled. So to me, that's the way to go. And again, we weren't there before because we were able to just shove all this material over to China. Now, if we're not, and it's really expensive to deal with it. And also people understand plastic in a way and recycling in a way that they didn't even 5 years ago, I think.
Mm.
So I totally agree with you, Tara, that we need to at least do dual stream. But I feel like I don't understand. I think it's a sin to have glass in with other materials. Like in Canada and Europe, glass is not in with other materials. I want to say that in parts of Washington State, it's not too. Glass should be separate, and you destroy its value if you put it together and that with other stuff, and it's just a sin. So yeah, I totally agree with you. That's how I would solve it also, is like, let's keep separating this stuff out, but we can do it in a pretty, remember, transport is real. The climate impacts of transport are real. I think we can make this much more efficient and much more cost effective with that kind of a system. So yeah, but I'm still figuring it out. If anybody runs across anything about this or talking to people about it, feel free to just about all curbside glass is sent to landfills or roadbed. Yeah, it's awful. But feel free to, send me. I'm at Pecci at just-zero.org. Yeah, can share the presentation. I'll send it to her tomorrow. And please reach out to me if you have other ideas or thoughts on this or good examples in your communities. You guys represent a really great cross section of the country. Let me know if there are other things that seem to be working that we can adopt in other places. Yeah, the places that have glass collection bins, that stuff gets recycled. Bottle bill glass gets recycled. Glass collection bills get recycled. Dropping it off at the Sturbridge Recycling Center, it gets recycled. But if it's in curbside, single stream.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Oh my
Thank
goodness.
you.
Sorry to everyone, we didn't get to the breakouts. We will next time, but it was so amazing to have you join us. And thank you for everything you've shared with us and everything you're doing at Just Zero. Really inspiring stuff. And I just realized I wasn't following you. I thought I was following Just Zero. And
What the heck,
anyway,
Stephanie?
so yeah.
Yeah, follow us on whatever you do. Email
Yes.
if you have questions. Let me know if you guys are, filing bills in your states, because that's what we do. We're coming out with toolkits mid-October with all different choose your own adventures on the bills. So different versions of bills based on where your state is. Some, for more conservative states, some for more aggressive states. And also our Waste Summit, I will make sure it has everything. So thank you so much for all the work you guys are doing. This is awesome.
Thank
All
you.
right. Fingers
Thank you
crossed
so
the
much.
election goes well. Talk to you later.